Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Great Books in 10 Minutes. This is the first part from our 2-video series on Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. Before we start, if you haven't downloaded it yet, the free companion app for this channel is available on both the Apple Store and Google Play Store. With this app, you'll get access to bonus content, trivia quizzes for each episode, and a free ebook library. To download, simply scan the QR code with your phone or click the links in the description box below. Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises is a masterpiece of modernist literature that captures the disillusionment of the lost generation. Set in the 1920s, this novel takes us from the café culture of Paris to the bullfighting arenas of Spain, following characters searching for meaning in a post-World War world. Hemingway's spare writing style and his portrayal of a generation grappling with existential questions have made The Sun Also Rises a defining work of 20th century literature. The main themes of The Sun Also Rises are disillusionment, alienation, masculinity, love, war, identity, hedonism, and escapism. The story begins with Jake Barnes, a wounded American veteran who had become impotent during the First World War, introducing us to Robert Cohn, a Jewish former middleweight boxing champion at Princeton. Despite disliking boxing, Cohn used it to overcome feelings of inferiority and shyness. His coach, Spider Kelly, permanently flattened his nose during a match. After graduation, Cohn's boxing championship went unrecognized, and he gave it up for good. Cohn came from a wealthy Jewish family. He married the first woman who showed him kindness, but after losing his inheritance and divorcing, he moved to California. In California, Cohn became involved in literary circles, backing an arts review magazine until it folded. Frances, his romantic partner, persuaded him to go to Europe. 2 years later, as Frances grew older, she became more insistent for Cohn to marry her. Cohn, who was receiving a reasonable monthly allowance from his mother, remained relatively content living in Europe and writing. Jake then recounts an incident where he suggested a trip to Strasbourg with Cohn to visit a female friend, which prompted visible jealousy from Frances. The incident at the cafe showed Frances's possessiveness, leading Cohn to avoid other women to appease her. Robert Cohn's trip to America marked a turning point in his life. His novel's acceptance by a prestigious publisher caused a rift with Frances, who noticed a change in him upon his return from New York. Cohn became more enamored with America, but also more complex, losing some of his simplicity and charm. The praise he received inflated his ego, especially coupled with newfound success in bridge games, which he began to boast about. Influenced by W.H. Hudson's romantic novel The Purple Land, Cohn saw life's possibilities through a romantic lens. He approached Jake with a proposal to travel to South America, seeking a deeper experience of life. Despite Jake's attempts to dissuade him and suggest living more fully in Paris, Cohn remained determined. Their conversation ended with Jake's polite invitation for drinks, which led to a candid discussion about the fear of missing out on life's opportunities. Jake empathized with Cohn's dilemma, but recognized the futility of convincing him otherwise. Cohn's stubbornness, rooted in his idealized notions from literature and his discontent with Paris, made him resistant to change. Jake sat alone outside a coffee house on a warm spring evening. A good-looking girl passed by, caught his eye, and joined him at the table. She ordered a drink, revealing her name as Georgette. Despite her initial sarcasm, their conversation revealed her cynical view of Paris. They shared a horse-drawn cab to a restaurant. In the cab, the girl put her hands on Jake's face and wanted to kiss him, but Jake declined and disclosed his war injury. At the restaurant, Jake met some of his friends and all went to a dance hall. After a few minutes, a beautiful woman named Brett arrived with a group of young men. Lady Brett Ashley was an English socialite and a friend of Jake, whom he had met while convalescing at a hospital during the war. Jake, not liking the rowdy youth who had accompanied Brett, left for a while, and when he returned, he saw Georgette dancing with one of them. At that moment, Robert Cohn, who was enamored with Brett's beauty, asked her to dance with him, but Brett declined and told him that she was going to dance with Jake. During the dance, Jake told Brett that it seemed like she had added Cohn to the list of his admirers. Jake and Brett then got into a taxi and left the bar together. In the car, Jake and Brett shared a passionate kiss, but Brett abruptly withdrew, citing her aversion to physical touch despite her love for Jake. Jake proposed keeping their distance, but Brett insisted on seeing him, despite the inevitable challenges. As they locked eyes, Brett reflected on her past actions and their consequences, saying that her love for Jake and Jake's injury is the price that she has to pay for the hell that she put men through. Jake tried to shift the conversation away from his own struggles, which were often trivialized by others. Upon arriving at the bar, Brett was introduced to a count by a portrait painter named Duke. The count treated Brett to champagne and invited Jake to join, but Jake declined and left while he learned of Georgette's behavior and Cohn's miserable state while going home with Frances. Jake bid farewell to Brett, who promised to meet him the next day at a hotel. Brett also confirmed receiving a letter from her fiancé Mike, who would soon travel to Paris. Jake arrived home alone. In bed, he began reading papers about bullfighting, but his mind soon wandered to his war injury that had left him impotent. He reflected on the advice from the Catholic Church to not dwell on this condition, wondering if meeting Brett after being wounded was the beginning of his troubles. Later, Jake was awoken by a commotion downstairs. A drunk Brett was arguing with the concierge who wouldn't let her up. Once Jake intervened, Brett came to his room, recounting how the wealthy count had offered her $10,000 to vacation with him, which she claimed to have declined. However, she admitted telling the count she loved Jake, and that the count had invited Jake to join them for an extravagant dinner the following evening. As Brett prepared to leave, she invited Jake to join her and the count for breakfast. Jake stated he was too far behind the night to be any fun. Alone again, Jake poured out his remaining drink, got into bed, and felt miserable thinking of Brett being with another man. On a pleasant Parisian morning, Jake enjoyed a leisurely walk, observing the lively street scenes before heading to his office. He was joined for lunch by Cohn, who admitted his writing wasn't going well. The conversation turned to Brett, her impending divorce, and plans to marry Mike Campbell. Cohn confessed he found Brett remarkably attractive and may be in love with her, though Jake insisted Brett loved Mike. Cohn didn't believe Brett would marry someone she didn't love. Jake stated matter-of-factly that Brett had married twice before without love. Cohn took great offense at this, perceiving it as an insult to Brett's character. An argument erupted, with Cohn demanding Jake apologize for his comments about Brett. After they calmed down and reaffirmed their friendship, Jake deftly avoided any further discussion of Brett when he sensed Cohn wanted to revisit the topic. They spent the rest of their time together discussing other matters before Jake departed for the office. Jake found himself waiting for Brett at the hotel at 5 o'clock. When she didn't show up, he wrote some letters and left. During a stroll around Paris, he contemplated if it was the association of ideas that caused dead spots on journeys and made people not like certain places. He then pondered if Robert Cohn's inability to enjoy Paris stemmed solely from reading the works of H.L. Mencken, who notoriously disliked the city. Later at a cafe, he reunited with Robert Cohn, whose earlier writing confidence had diminished. Jake reflected that Cohn never exhibited issues until falling for Brett. Even his once beloved tennis game fell apart afterwards. Frances, Cohn's fiancée, soon arrived and asked Jake to accompany her for a walk. During their walk, she revealed the news that Cohn no longer wished to marry her, claiming he hadn't lived enough. Frances confided to Jake that the real reason Cohn got cold feet was his desire to experience success from an upcoming book release in New York that fall. Frances continued that Cohn prioritized personal achievement over marriage. When they returned from their walk and sat at the table again, an emotional Frances went on an embarrassing rant about Cone right in front of him. During her outburst, she sarcastically berated Cone's emotional immaturity, his tendency to cry around women, and his seeming wish to keep a mistress rather than a wife. As Frances's denigrating rant continued, Jake politely excused himself, slipped out a side door, hailed a taxi, and retreated to his flat, leaving a displeased Cone behind at the coffee house. Jake returned to his apartment, greeted by a concierge whose attitude toward Brett had significantly improved thanks to the generous tip she had left. He was informed that Brett and the Count would soon return to meet him. As he showered, Brett and the Count arrived to collect him. Sensing Jake's distress, Brett noticed his extended preparation time. Upon discovering him lying face down on the bed, she sent the Count to fetch champagne and bought herself some time to be alone with Jake. Jake proposed living together, but Brett foresaw herself being unfaithful. Jake then suggested going to the countryside for a while, but Brett declined, saying she couldn't live a quiet life and didn't want to hurt her one true love. She then mentioned leaving soon for San Sebastian. After the Count returned with great champagne, regaling them with stories of his past arrow wounds, the trio went out for dinner and dancing. However, Brett suddenly grew distressed while dancing with Jake and requested to be taken home. Outside Brett's apartment, she kissed Jake goodbye, saying they would not meet again. Jake did not hear from Brett again until after her return from San Sebastian. With Frances in England, Robert Cone had also disappeared, though he left Jake his bank details to contact him through it. Jake enjoyed this freedom while getting ready to leave for their Spain fishing trip with his writer friend Bill Gorton at the end of June. Bill returned from a trip to Vienna and Budapest, recounting how he witnessed an African wrestler being pelted by the crowd after beating the local champion. On a stroll, Bill jokingly suggested buying Jake a stuffed dog and horse, making humorous remarks and telling Jake that a stuffed dog would brighten up his dull flat. They then ran into Brett on the street and invited her for drinks before her fiancé Mike's return. Later, Jake and Bill joined Brett and a drunken Mike for dinner, where Mike kept drunkenly going on about Brett's beauty and at the same time disparaging the hat she was wearing. When Jake told Bill about Mike's annoying continuous remarks about his fiancé's allure, Bill said he didn't blame him. Jake received a letter from Robert Cone wanting to join him and Bill on their upcoming fishing trip to Spain. Jake agreed for Cone to meet them in Bayonne before traveling together to Pamplona. Jake also visited Brett and her fiancé Mike at a bar, where Mike asked if he and Brett could join the fishing trip as well, to which Jake agreed with plans to all meet up in Spain. After Mike left, Brett revealed to Jake that Robert Cone was the person with whom she had gone to San Sebastian. Jake became angry initially, but then suggested Brett inform Cone to give him a chance to opt out of the trip, considering her fiancé was going to be there. I hope you enjoyed my summary of the first part of Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. Don't forget that the second part is also available on the channel. If you haven't downloaded it yet, the free companion app for this channel is available on both the Apple Store and Google Play Store. With this app, you'll get access to bonus content, trivia quizzes for each episode, and a free ebook library. To download, simply scan the QR code with your phone or click the links in the description box below. Thank you and see you in the next episode.